Nope. Now it is.
Testing. Testing. There we go. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you. It's a pleasure for me to open this joint session to take stock of holistic circular economy approaches. It's really a privilege for the IAF to co-host this dialogue session together with UNEP and the World Bank on behalf of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. I'm pleased to welcome such distinguished speakers from government and the private sector on this panel. My name is Joe McMonagle. I'm the Secretary General of the International Energy Forum. The IAF is the acronym you keep hearing. The IAF is the world's only neutral facilitator of producer-consumer dialogue between countries that account for 90% of global energy supply and demand. Dialogue has never been more important to reach climate and sustainable development goals.
En ce qui concerne la durabilité, ce que nous aide à d'identifier les choses qu'on doit développer. Comme vous savez, que l'IF a présenté avant tout ce qui concerne les dirigeants de sommet 20 et surtout cette année sur la réunion ministérielle qui c'était, il y avait des solutions pour qu'on arrive à le résultat pour qu'on puisse réussir à changer aider à changer le changement climatique. Et parmi les choses qui nous aident à ça, c'est les décideurs qui vont décider par rapport au changement climatique. Et sont les techniques qui vont diminuer l'émission de gaz et aussi va aider à transition et qui pour aussi le marché d'énergie et la durabilité aussi. En ce qui concerne les techniques d'oxyde de carbone, ça nous donne, nous créer pour le secteur privé, pour d'autres industries, et ça nous permet aussi d'industrie aussi par rapport à les opportunités dans les innovations, les techniques innovatives vers les CO2 pour protéger notre planète de ça et aussi pour aider le secteur privé et qui nous aide aussi à consommer beaucoup de modèles, surtout les investisseurs jouent un rôle très important pour tester ça et aussi pour permettre à effectuer des recherches, surtout en ce qui concerne les investisseurs et les dirigeants qui vont coordonner globalement vers les initiatives et aussi les discussions qui étaient faites depuis cette semaine, qui nous donnent des directions claires pour les solutions de carbone. Et aussi, je remercie les travaux de ces gouvernements. Il y a beaucoup d'investissements qui étaient bien mis en place, mais il faut qu'on travaille encore plus dans ce cas et aussi le gouvernement doit avoir l'espoir et avoir l'investissement dans ce domaine pour faciliter l'arrivée à ces objectifs. Alors, cette science va apporter ses expériences par rapport aux solutions intelligentes, ce qui garantit l'hydrogène propre et aussi pour la capacité de l'énergie et également en ce qui concerne les solutions pour garantir en ce qui concerne ces émissions et aussi l'énergie qui ont la partie très grande à cause de la démocratie et ce qui permet le commerce à évoluer et à s'adapter les ressources naturelles aussi, qui renforce la sécurité de marché et d'augmenter aussi la résistance et aussi la transition. Pour ça, merci beaucoup pour votre présence ici. Et j'ai l'honneur d'être le président de cette séance. On va commencer par M. Tarek.
Thank you, Joseph. Good afternoon.
Merci, Joseph. Bonsoir. Nous sommes très contents de vous voir ici. Nous sommes en train d'accepter ces discussions et ces traités qui étaient accordés. Si on regarde l'histoire de ces émissions, c'est clair qu'on a besoin de réduire 30% de ces gaz à serre nuisibles qui va nous aider à diminuer ces risques. Alors, on doit diminuer 40% d'émissions au niveau mondial pour diminuer l'effet de réchauffement climatique. Alors, depuis 2026, si on dit que ça sera diminué à moitié si les objectifs dans ces constructions internationales est bien éteindre. On dit que ça va nous aider à diminuer l'émission de gaz. Alors, ces chiffres dramatiques pour vous dire que nous avons vraiment besoin de multiplier le travail pour réduire et trouver des solutions pour éliminer les émissions nuisibles. Et cette région, ils ont hâte de réaliser ces objectifs. Et on a vu que les pays, par exemple en Jordanie, qui ont moins d'émissions. Alors nous sommes prêts pour que cette région est en train de réduire. Et j'ai regroupé un chiffre pour la consommation de ça, pour les prisons. Comme vient de dire Joseph, et je ne savais pas et j'ai demandé à mon équipe de chercher dans ce domaine, surtout dans cette région. On a vu qu'il y a 3 compagnies et aussi en Arabie Saoudite, 3 organisations. Ils ont d'oxygène qui égale 3 000 tonnes. C'est un sujet très important et très intéressant pour ces efforts et surtout pour ce projet qui pourrait être augmenté à 10 millions de tonnes vers 2030. Et comme nous savons que l'idée est très importante pour parvenir les émissions de CO2. Alors, on a besoin des moyens plus évolués pour diminuer ces émissions nuisibles. Nous savons que les pays de Golfe peuvent consommer le prix jusqu'à $1 000 et qui égale 1% pour l'année 2030. Et en même temps, si notre région travaille rapidement et progressivement pour atteindre les objectifs, si on prend un exemple comme les pays de Golfe qui va aider leur partie pour renouveler l'énergie à 50% en 2030, ce qui résulterait à 50 millions de CO2. Alors, on a besoin encore des idées nouvelles. Franchement, j'espère qu'on participe en ce qui concerne ces procédures dans cette région et on doit atteindre ces objectifs rapidement. Merci.
Hi everyone, my name is Rafif Abdelrazak and I'll be your moderator today with the
Bonjour,
Sustained panel.
je m'appelle Rafif,
I'm the program
je
leader
suis
for sustainable
la
development at
directrice
the
de
World
cette
Bank
séance.
and
Je
one of the
serai
partners leading this session.
La directrice de cette
So
séance.
I don't want to repeat what's already been said, but I will say that a
J'aimerais
circular
pas
economy
répéter ce
offers
que
a
vient de
sustainable
dire mon
alternative
collègue,
to the
mais ce
current
qui
linear
concerne
economy.
cette
So for
économie
those unfamiliar with that, that means the model of production
va
and
nous donner des
consumption
solutions
that
par
aims,
rapport à
it's a
l'économie
model of
actuelle, par rapport à la
production
production et la
consumption that aims
consommation,
to maintain the value of the products,
et
its materials and its resources
qui a
for as long as
l'objectif
possible,
de
and to
protéger
avoid
ces
and minimize
productions,
the generation of waste.
qui
a transition into a
va
circular
diminuer
economy can help lead us
la
towards a green,
production de
resilient,
ces
and inclusive
produits par
development,
rapport à
can help
l'économie
us achieve climate targets, as has
circulaire,
already been noted,
qui va
as well
aider
as the
la
sustainable
résilience
development goals.
pour les
This
économies
session will
durables.
look at the circular economy approaches from different perspectives, from both public
Cette
sector as well
séance
as private sector. We will be discussing, and
Cette séance
hopefully in the
apporte
questions and
tous les
feedback we
axes de ce
get, what
domaine, soit par le
supporting
secteur
governance
public ou le
frameworks
secteur
should look
privé,
like,
ce
what policies are needed to enable
ce qui
action, like the ones
encourageait
mentioned,
le gouvernement
emissions
et ce qui
reduction,
sont les
as well as
politiques
carbon
et qui sont les
capture utilization,
procédures
modern
à
bioenergy, and
prendre
waste to
pour
energy, as
diminuer
well as
ces
nature-based
émissions et aussi
solutions.
l'énergie renouvelable
Allow me to introduce
et
the panel.
aussi
We have with us
les
today
solutions,
Iyad Al-Jabran
les
from
solutions pour l'environnement.
General
On a
Director of
Iyad
the Climate
Al-Jabran,
Change Negotiations Unit at the Ministry of Energy here in Saudi Arabia, and our hosts for this Climate Week. We also have with us
ministère de
Engineer Bilal
l'énergie.
Shikarin, the Climate
Et
Change
on a
Director for
aussi
the
l'ingénierie
Jordanian Ministry of
Bilal,
Environment.
qui est le directeur de
We
changement de
also have with
climat
us from the private sector
au
Rehan
ministère
Beg,
de
the
l'environnement
Chief
en
Corporate
Jordanie.
Affairs
On a Ian
Strategy
Beck
and
aussi,
Sustainability
qui
Unit
est le
at
directeur
Aquapower.
participant
Glad to
dans
have you.
le
We
changement
also have
de Aquapower.
Zoe Knight, the group head
On a
and
aussi
Center
Zoe
for
Nana,
Center of Sustainable
qui est la
Finance, Head of
directrice
Climate Change at HSBC.
en ce qui
We also have with
concerne
us
le
Arshid
changement
Zvari,
climatique
CEO
en
Oxygen
SP.
from the UAE.
Et
Thank you
Naris
for
Bari
joining us.
aussi, qui est le
And we have
directeur
as well Cornelia Meyer,
exécutif
Chairman and
des
Chief Economist for
d'Émirats. Et on a
Asset Management.
Imaer, qui est la
And
directrice de
lastly,
LFB.
Cosmin Gita,
Et
CEO
dernièrement,
for
on
Nuclear
a
Electrica
Gita,
here in KSA.
qui est le directeur exécutif
So
de
we
Economies.
have a series of questions, but before
En
we get
Arabie
into it, I'd
Saoudite,
like to hand
on
it over to the
on a
panelists to
beaucoup
come in
de
and tell us
questions.
their
J'aimerais
perspective
bien,
from
avant
both
d'y aller aux
whether
questions,
government
j'aimerais
or
bien poser
private sector,
les
and then
locuteurs par
we'll
rapport à
go
leur
into the
vision
questions.
pour
I'll start
par
with
rapport au
Engineer Bilal,
secteur
since he's right
privé et le
next to me.
secteur public. Et après, je vais commencer par Bilal, comme il soit à côté de moi. Premièrement, j'aimerais bien, je veux dire ce que j'ai dit par rapport à l'augmentation de population et aussi en ce qui concerne l'économie circulaire et que ces ressources naturelles ne sont pas assez. Alors, on doit commencer à utiliser les outils, les technologies pour permettre à l'économie de bien fonctionner. Il y avait un travail global sur le gouvernance et qui regroupe les investisseurs pour que ce soit un travail rentable. Et on voit que tous ces moyens peuvent diminuer de ces procédures réglementaires, ce qui entraîne la diminution de le chômage et aussi pour la croissance d'économie en général en Jordanie, surtout en Jordanie. Il y aura des détails, mais je vais laisser à la fin de cette séance. Maintenant, je vais passer la question à la côté gouvernemental. Merci de m'inviter ici. À mon avis, d'une vision gouvernementale, moi, je vais parler directement sur le côté du climat. On a un défi très énorme et le moyen pour y arriver à diminuer ces émissions et pour profiter de toutes les solutions qu'on a qui peuvent nous aider à diminuer, à éliminer ces émissions. pour protéger la température. Et tout ça nous demande des solutions innovantes. C'est pour ça, avec la concentration sur les émissions, que l'Arabie saoudite, comme qui était par le directeur de FRE, qu'il a dit que l'économie circulaire qui a été générée depuis le groupe de 2020 et que l'Arabie saoudite a construit un programme sur la gouvernance et qui est prêt pour effectuer ces méthodologies et ces moyens. Et aussi, l'Arabie saoudite a construit l'économie circulaire qui couvre tous les domaines par l'élimination de ces émissions et aussi l'Arabie saoudite a des ambitions très élevées, des ambitions pour éliminer ces émissions de gaz. Comme c'était déjà discuté dans la conférence de climat l'année dernière, et 9 de ces projets vont être prêts pour exécuter en 2030 et qui va éliminer le carbone. Et ce n'est pas seulement sur le gouvernement, mais aussi il y a des programmes. Surtout que la plupart des pays qui ont déjà consisté ces genres de secteurs et les défis qu'on a en futur est de diminuer ces émissions et d'avoir l'infrastructure et être aussi capable pour réagir pour confronter ces défis. Et d'autre côté, il y a des ambitions très importants pour jouer ce rôle. Et aussi, nous avons ces efforts en ce qui concerne l'hydrogène et aussi pour profiter du carbone et la transition de carbone pour que ce soit en valeur au lieu d'être que ce soit un problème. La dernière chose, en ce qui concerne de cet axe, que c'est important qu'il faut qu'on comprenne que il y a des pays qui ont des conditions, si on parle de notre région, ces technologies est très important si on regarde la technique de SEOS et par rapport au carbone, c'est important pour garantir qu'on travaille ensemble à côté pour augmenter ces chiffres et l'efficacité de ces procédures de changement climatique. Et c'est intéressant quand on a entendu notre collègue quand il a mentionné des chiffres et que l'Arabie saoudite a réussi pour cette région avec ses rentables très importants et on voit que ces chiffres vont être augmentés et nous invitons tout le monde d'y participer et collaborer pour augmenter ces nouveaux techniques. Merci. Comme vous avez mentionné ce point, nous allons parler avec Rehan pour voir votre point de vue dans le secteur privé. D'abord, je suis honoré d'être ici. Merci pour l'invitation. Je vais encadrer ce point-ci. En ce qui concerne les partenariats publics et privés, en ce qui concerne l'investissement, en ce qui concerne le dessalement, nous sommes parmi les grandes compagnies par rapport à ça et la production d'énergie. J'ai entendu dans quelques séances qui étaient passées dernièrement que l'hydrogène verte, qui nous sommes en partenariat dans ce domaine, nos produits aujourd'hui, c'est sont de hydrogène chaque jour. Ça pour vous donner des idées pour les années 2030, que ça ne sera pas un problème et les défis qui doivent être là ne seront pas plus là. 46% d'énergie renouvelable et notre objectif, ce n'est pas qu'il n'y aura pas de taux plus que moitié dans les 7 années prochaines. Il faut équilibrer les choses. Il y a un point à dire. Alors, on a entendu beaucoup de chiffres, mais il y a une chose que je dois éclairer, que l'endroit où nous sommes maintenant, et les questions qui étaient posées par les collègues en 2016 étaient 9,20 mégawatts. Et c'était choquant pour moi parce que depuis 2016, la plupart des compagnies, investisseurs, dans l'énergie bleue, ce qui s'arrive ici en Arabie Saoudite, pour la vision, aussi avec la vision saoudienne pour réaliser ça, c'est une chose très étonnante. On commence par un peu d'espoir, c'est déjà pas mal pour commencer. Et ce qui se fait à l'Arabie Saoudite maintenant, et on essaye maintenant d'appliquer ce qu'on a appris d'Arabie Saoudite, surtout sur ça, surtout qu'il y aura un jumelage entre le secteur public et le secteur privé. Surtout, ce problème nous oblige de travailler rapidement et prendre des décisions rapidement. En ce qui concerne le financement de ces technologies ou ressources, un exemple intéressant, le vice-président de Pakistan ont employé le développement dans ce secteur. Alors, peut-être je vais parler en détail, mais je préfère qu'on s'arrête là. Je vais présenter quelques expériences en Roumanie, parce qu'en Roumanie, nous aussi voulons essayer de 55% d'émissions de gaz dans environ plus ou moins une décennie, mais ça dépend aussi de la résistance qui est à 60%. Alors nous faisons ça par éliminer les produits de mine. Et ça pour nous, pour protéger et nous permet d'être stable dans la stabilité de ce domaine. Historiquement, nous avons l'industrie d'aluminium et les pétrochimiques et aussi la transition d'hydrogène. On a une histoire aussi de gaz et le pétrole aussi. Et l'ammonia aussi. Et ça, en ce qui concerne l'alimentation de pétrochimiques, toutes ces opérations, nous avons utilisé des solutions de carbone. Et c'est à partir d'ici mon travail. Ce n'est pas seulement qu'on a une compagnie ou on a une liste spécifique sur la production renouvelable, qui est sur
ourselves to
l'initiative
expand our
FRE,
current
mais nous
large
travaillons
reactors that
pour
our Canadian design can do.
augmenter
And they
ces
allowed us to maintain
partenariats très
independence and have
importants
an integrated
avec
nuclear
le
cycle
Canada
in,
qui nous
in the
rendent
country.
plus stables dans
To also
le
replacing the
recyclage dans
former
le
coal
pays.
facilities with SMRs.
Et aussi,
And we're the first
la
country
transition des
that I know
de
of,
mines
and
aussi,
we're the
nous
first one
sommes
in
les
Europe
premiers
that
pays,
is
comme vous
physically
saviez, que
replacing
par
a
rapport à
former
l'Europe,
coal facility with a small modular reactor.
effectivement,
Our target being to be
ce
able
qu'on
to
a
bring
la
2,000
transition
megawatts
de
into the grid
production de mines
by
à
2032,
l'autre,
us as a
aux
company.
autres produits, ce
And
qui
what
diminuait
we're seeing more
l'émission.
on the SMR side, more so than the base
Et
load
ce qu'on
nuclear that
voit
we know
comme
very well.
compagnie
It's good base load. It balances
dans
out,
ces
especially if you
domaines
have some hydrogen
que
next to it or some
équilibre,
data
qui,
centers that you can take the extra power. It
l'équilibre aussi,
balances out
l'équitable.
very well with a wind farm that's right
S'il y a
across
un
the
centre
hill from our
s'il y a
nuclear
un
power plant.
centre
But
d'information,
also, we're getting queries
mais
from
nous,
the oil and gas
mais
operators
nous
that are in the
avons
Black Sea, 50 kilometers out of our site. Can you bring a high voltage direct current cable, just 60 to 100
est-ce
kV,
que vous pensez
into
d'avoir un
right
voltage
next
qui
door?
a,
Because
qui
we
a
might need
un
some
pouvoir
direct
de
air capture, we will
600
need CCS
pour qu'on
and all the
puisse avoir,
technologies. I was very
être
impressed
besoin
to see
pour
while I'm
toutes ces
here the
technologies
preoccupation for
et je
all
suis
of that.
étonnant
But at the end,
qu'il y a une
the
adaptation
necessary
de ces
electricity
technologies,
to be able
mais
to convert all of this into
en ce qui
reality
concerne
is
les
humongous.
besoins,
And that is why I'm
demande à
one of the biggest advocates
l'électricité,
for nuclear
ça
power.
c'est vraiment
Because I
considéré
definitely
très
think that this is
énorme.
a way in which you can
Et
create
moi, je suis
resiliency,
pour
support
l'énergie
supply chains
atomique
and
qui
supply
va
chain development,
augmenter la
and support
résilience
energy transition.
et
If
aussi
you
pour
use
l'évolution des
warmer
pays
sites,
et
it's
aussi
easier
pour
to deploy.
transition des
But,
énergies
and it makes it
qui est
faster.
facile
But
à
that's
être
the European
distribuée et
context.
qui va
Each
rendre
particular region needs
plus
to
facile
develop
aussi
its own.
pour la
So,
distribution.
I think
Chaque
that,
zone
and even the
doit
facility that we're
évoluer,
currently replacing, a
doit
coal facility,
s'évoluer,
we're doing it
surtout
together
dans
with
les
solar and a
institutions,
hydrogen
les
plant
organes
to
qui
support the
produisent
community,
les
the grid.
mines.
And
Alors,
the
on
first
fait ça
green steel facility,
par
they'll be built out just 10
l'énergie
kilometers out.
solaire
And they'll all be able to take these products
et
behind the
construire
wire, or in a private wire or
au lieu
off-grid.
des
Depends on where
kilomètres
you are.
de ces
Use whatever
compagnies.
terminology you want. So I
Et vous
think that one
pouvez,
of the things that's
vous
not
aurez,
being
vous
discussed
auriez
about, we're
à
talking
réaliser
storage,
ça.
we're talking
Alors, parmi les choses
renewables
qu'on n'a pas parlé de
openly,
stockage aussi
and
et les autres,
maybe I can infer why, but I
sujets
live in Europe and I'm
sur
pretty
l'énergie
open about it.
renouvelable.
Is
Moi, je
we're
vis
not mentioning
en
nuclear
Europe
enough
et
in the
je
conversation.
suis
And I
ouvert
think that is
à
one of the
ces
missing
domaines.
pieces that from
Et
a technical grid standpoint needs to be discussed more. Romania, in the past 27 years of operations of its nuclear power plant,
ce
has
point
managed
doit
to
être discuté
achieve top
en
performance.
Roumanie,
Even
surtout en
itself,
ce
as
qui
a small
concerne
country, we studied hard, and
les
our
stations
units at Chernobyl are ranking
nucléaires
number
en,
one and three
en
in the world in
Roumanie,
terms of capacity
parce que c'est
factor and
le
nuclear safety
premier
excellence.
et
And we're trying to
troisième
support our
au
operations
monde
more.
entier.
So, in
Et
that
on
sense,
essaie de
I think that's a story
renforcer
that everybody needs
et
to
supporter
discuss.
cette
And in the future,
opération.
why not?
Alors,
You know, we
c'est
can
ça
power carbon
l'histoire.
capture
Alors,
storage,
pour y
direct air
discuter
capture,
à
and integrate
l'avenir.
with oil and gas. I think it's going to
Et-
come quite soon for decarbonization.
Et ça vient
Thank you.
prochainement.
Great
Merci.
points. And great food for thought on where we're going next. Maybe I can hand it over to Ms. Arshi to give us a
maintenant,
perspective from the UAE and her company.
Je passe à mon collègue qui vient des Émirats pour nous donner son avis. Merci beaucoup pour cette semaine de climat. J'ai un partenariat d'oxygène et ça fait partie de cette région. Et pour générer ces productions, la compagnie Oxygenate est générée à partir de les arbres de bambou. Et elle a la puissance de 4000 de chaque arbre et génère 30 000 tonnes d'oxygène. Et ça à cause des ressources riches qui viennent des arbres et la réalité que, en ce qui concerne l'énergie renouvelable entre l'éthanol et l'hydrogène, et aussi l'huile bio, il y a le H2 qui produisent le pétrole à partir de bambou. Alors, on a parlé des solutions énergiques. Ce sont des solutions d'environnement qui réduit à peu près 6 degrés de chaleur. Et on a des statistiques qui étaient mentionnées par mon collègue pour que nous sommes parce qu'il s'agit des ingénieurs. Les recherches ont bien approuvé leur réussite et aussi il y avait des discussions sur ces ressources et production et qu'on a recyclé l'eau usée parce qu'on n'a pas parlé de l'eau usée. Et quand on pense à l'agriculture de bambou, on parle de l'énergie renouvelable et l'utilisation pour l'arbre de bambou. Tout ce que vous voyez dans cette chambre peuvent être produits par le bambou 100%. Alors on parle de l'économie circulaire et ses efficacités sous la guidance de Mohamed Ben Zayed Al Nahyan qui a mis un agenda pour avoir l'augmentation des technologies.
Thank you so much, and thank you for
Merci.
emphasizing the circular side of things. If I could hand it over to Zoe.
Thank you, and thank you for the invitation to speak this afternoon. I come from the world of finance, which is nowhere near as interesting as the bamboo activities that you're growing in your business. But anyway, I'd like to share some insights with you this afternoon around what the financial community is doing to act on climate. So first off, at a high level, I mean, everybody knows that a crucial role is for the finance community to step up in terms of allocating capital to projects. That's no secret. So I think the real question is, why are we not doing it faster? And what are the drivers that have gotten us to this point?
Pourquoi ne pouvons pas faire cela rapidement pour atténuer ces émissions en arrivant à 2030, si vous voyez au début comment ces financements, des risques et nous prenons du temps pour prendre des décisions.
Being asked to step up, take responsibility, and allocate capital to downward emissions curves. So that means taking three factors into account. It means looking at risk, not just from a financial sense, also from a climate sense, i.e. the transition risk associated with moving away from a fossil-based economy, and if policy is implemented to drive that change, whether or not the value of assets will be maintained or even increased, or whether that will decline. So the stranded assets consideration. On the opportunity side, it's about looking at the obvious categories like scaling up renewables, implementing energy efficiency activities, working with companies that are working on recycling and moving to a circular economy stance. But some of those factors don't make sense economically in a country-by-country basis, and so therefore the finance community can help by advocating for a certain policy environment to be able to drive movement faster in those activities. But the point on aligning emissions and aligning capital to a downward emissions curve, this is where the circular economy visibility becomes really helpful for the finance sector. And being here in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia,
Ici,
we
en
have
Arabie
to
Saoudite,
give a real
nous
compliment
devons-
to the way that the Vision 2030 agenda
nous devons-
sets out a very clear pathway which is
la vision
helpful to the finance
2030
community because it provides a roadmap for what the kingdom wants to achieve and where the investment needs to go in order to drive that change. So that's particularly
Et c'est
helpful.
l'Arabie Saoudite avec ses
So this move towards
investissements,
alignment
c'est un sujet
makes us as a
important.
financial
Et aussi
community
concernant la
think about
balance,
the different parts of the
du
capital
point de vue
system that
économique,
can provide
dans des
funding to
régions
different topics.
différentes,
Now, I'm being very
qui
explicit
peuvent
about this
supporter
in
et
the context
soutenir.
of carbon
Je
capture,
vais être
utilization and storage.
franche
So,
concernant l'élimination
broader
de
society often
carbone
think
et le
of
stockage.
finance as being
Dans-
investment. But
Dans
investment
des
is about
communautés, grandes
generating a
communautés
return
ne
on
pensent
assets,
pas à
whereas
l'investissement,
funding
mais
might
aussi
need to come from a whole variety of sources that shift the risk profile of projects and provide a certain activity or
et
action in
transformer
terms of financing and funding
ces
the project.
projets
So there's a lot of work that the
pour
finance
financer
community
ces
can
projets.
do on
Il
being
y a
more
aussi
transparent
des
at where
actions
different actors
que
fit into this
l'action
process, whether it's the multilateral development
financière,
banks, venture capital at one end of the scale, the other end of the scale, and then the commercial banks that are sitting in between.
La banque commerciale.
One of the things that has really changed significantly over the last 3 years for the better in terms of finance is the role of regulators
Le sujet
and
qui a été changé depuis
shareholders
3 ans
in
du
helping
point de
us
vue
drive our
économique,
thinking of this alignment problem. So, if you think of the
législation a
financial
été
sector
changée
as
pour
setting out a net
contribuer
zero
à
ambition by
faire
2050, and what does that really mean?
équilibre
It means setting financing
pour
targets,
arriver à
and it
l'année
means accounting for the
2050
emissions
pour
associated with the
atteindre
finance that's
ces
provided.
objectifs
So, for
de ces
example, in the power
financements,
utilities and oil and gas
et
sector,
comme par
banks are now
exemple
measuring the emissions associated with
secteur
those
de
sectors and
gaz,
setting targets themselves. This is
selon
really
ces
important
secteurs,
because it means that we need to
cela
start
est
thinking about how we support
une
different
approche
stakeholders in
approche
different countries,
importante, comment
acknowledging
cela,
that every country is coming from a different
comment
starting point.
peut-on discuter
So I
avec
think we'll probably
les
come back to those
intéressés
stakeholder drivers
de
in
différents
thinking of what comes next a bit
secteurs.
later on in the discussion. But lastly, I really want to leave on an optimistic note of how the
Enfin,
financial
j'aimerais
sector as a
bien
whole can be a kind
tenir
of
votre
global
attention,
superconnector
donner une
of
remarque, un
best practice
espoir
and lessons learned
qu'il y
across
aura
different sectors.
des
I
leçons
represent
et
HSBC here today, and we operate in
Moi,
over
je
60 countries,
représente
and we're participating in coalitions like the Glasgow
CBC.
Financial Alliance for Net
Nous
Zero,
sommes
which
plus
take
de
a
60
holistic approach to
pays
what the financial
pour
sector can do
la
on
production
climate.
de zéro.
And that means that
Nous avons
by
des résultats globaux.
talking with my
Est-ce que
regional colleagues,
cela
we
se
can take the lessons learned here
et en
across to
discutant
Asia,
avec mes
Europe, the US,
collègues de
and really try and
différentes
mobilize
nationalités
capital
en
much
Asie, aux
more quickly
États-Unis,
to help us
et
get on
aussi
track
au
for that
Moyen-Orient.
downward curve that we need to see by
Cela
2030.
va nous aider
Thank
de
you. I really liked your point on global
tenir
superconnector. And I think
le
that's
droit
what's
chemin.
great about events
Merci,
like this, where we can share
beaucoup,
knowledge about what's working and
de votre
how we can
discours.
transfer it to different places. And keeping it
Comment
within the
peut-on,
finance world, and that last but not least,
échanger nos
Cornelia,
pratiques et
love to hear
enfin
from you.
Thank you very much
j'aimerais bien entendre,
for having me
madame.
on this panel. Thank
Merci
you, Joe, for
pour
inviting me. It's great to be on the
m'inviter
panel
et être
with
avec vous
UNEP
à
and
cette
with the World Bank. As a
discussion.
former development banker, I certainly do appreciate that.
Je-
I'm going to go on a very macro
Je
view.
viens
and
de la
thank you very much,
Banque
Zoe, for
mondiale.
your
Je vais
enlightening
parler
remarks.
de point
We
de
will, by
vue
2050, have 2 billion
économique
people
en
more
détail.
in
Et
this world.
merci mes collègues
And
pour
they will
les
mainly live
paroles
in
qui ont
Africa and in
discuté
South
et
Asia. So
mentionné.
this is a very tall
Parler
task.
des personnes
We
qui
still
vivent en
have
Afrique
700 million
et
living
aussi
in energy
sud,
poverty. And
est
if
de
we are not
l'Asie, il reste
careful
encore
in having the
beaucoup de
right
personnes qui
policy
vivent en
frameworks and the right
pauvreté.
financing
Si
frameworks,
ne
and we cut off funding for certain things. We still need some hydrocarbons, but we might have, something to the tune of 10 to 20% of people living in energy poverty. So we really need to be very careful, and that is really where the circular carbon economy comes in, because if the population grows and we have a given amount of resources, obviously it is paramount to reuse, recycle, and remove carbon. And again, carbon is not really the enemy. CO2 is an enemy, and reaching net zero does not necessarily mean zero carbon, because we have the carbon removal technologies which will need to be financed. And in that sense, as Sarah pointed out, it's really important to have the right regulatory frameworks. But when we look at the challenge as a whole, at the financing challenge, you have recently had a UN endorsed report which said, if we want to get to net zero, the developing world needs something like $1 trillion a year in investment until 2030. And the Paris Agreement has stipulated that there is a recycling of finances from the developed world to the developing world to the tune of $100 billion a year. The developed world has not delivered, not 1 year have we delivered the 100 billion. So this is really big. If we look at to 2050, if we look at the whole system, not just energy, the whole transport, everything, the figures go between 3 trillion and 6 trillion. So these are humongous numbers. The question is, how can we finance, and especially how can we not let down the developing world? There's certainly lessons we can learn from what you are doing with bamboo trees, from what's happening in the kingdom, what's happening in under the enlightened leadership of the government here, what's happening in UAE. But we still need to have the right frameworks in place, and that's where I would say your sector, the multilateral development sector, is very important, and that's also where the linkage between there's the TAs, the technical assistances, all the things to advise on the regulatory frameworks, but there's also the linkage between the private and the public sector, and the things which magnify, have a multiplier effect. MEGA, the insurance side. We have other private sector things. We have in the Islamic Development Bank, which is a very interesting organization. I used to work for the Asian Development Bank, and I've been following the IDB very closely over the last 15 years, and I look at, it's the true South-South organization, and I see the reverse linkage, and that's something that Rehan, you sort of mentioned, what you're doing with Uzbekistan is also, it has that reverse linkage thing. But they have ISIC, the trade finance arm, they have ISIC, the insurance arm, ITFC, the trade finance arm, and ICD, the IFC of the IDB, the Islamic Corporation for the Development. So we have those actors are incredibly important, and the way that these actors work with the other financial institutions and the private sector is important. And just one last comment. When we look at these frameworks, it's nice to sit in a semi-detached home somewhere in Britain or Switzerland and opine on what's good for the world. You have to walk in another person's shoes to know what it's like, and so it's different in Pakistan, and the imperatives may be different. I'm just mentioning Pakistan because Rehan is sitting here, but so we need to look at that, and we need to learn to listen. And one thing that we need, especially when I look at the RACs, the risk acceptance, there comes the former Citibank, the risk acceptance criteria of the banks to be realistic in what is feasible. And I would just plead for the least common trait of humankind, which is common sense, to prevail when we look at those frameworks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we're in agreement on a lot of things, if not all. So we have a series of questions, and I might direct it to different people, but if you feel you'd like to come in, please do. This is a very interactive session, and it would be a shame to lose all the knowledge we have on this esteemed panel. So first, I'd like to start with that countries across the Middle East and North Africa are making promising progress and changes in advancing climate ambition. I think we've already heard about a few and some of the ways that they're going. But there are more opportunities available, but there's also quite a few challenges. So in order to address them, it would be good to kind of understand a bit more about those. And I'd like to start, please, with Engineer Bilal, and then Iyad, and then we'll see.
Avec l'ingénieur Bilal. Merci pour cette question, parce que cette affaire en Jordanie, nous avons mis à jour des politiques concernant le changement climatique de 2022 jusqu'à 2025. Nous avons une vision concernant l'atténuation du carbone, une stratégie complète pour l'année de 2024.
Not a fully deployed, but almost fully deployed MRV system, greenhouse gas registry. Jordan did also
nous avons réalisé une réussite remarquable. 4 secteurs qui ont des plans pour le développement, comme j'avais dit auparavant, que nous, le gouvernement, nous facilite les chemins et les approches pour trouver des solutions pour le changement climatique. Et pour penser à ce sujet, nous devons être heureux et optimistes. Si nous nous mettons à la place de ces personnes, si ce projet il y a un empowerment pour l'économie circulaire et aussi pour les entreprises, nous avons commencé l'initiative verte que le projet, ils auront des données claires, des éléments aussi clairs, et il va qui revient avec des grands retours, et j'aimerais bien affirmer pour l'atténuation de cela, et le gouvernement facilite ce sujet pour la production de zéro.
Can we hear a bit about some of the opportunities you're seeing from your perspective here in KSA, and maybe some of the challenges you're trying to overcome?
Ici, en Arabie Saoudite, les défis que vous allez affronter et résoudre, bien sûr, si vous me permettez, j'aimerais bien commenter sur ma collègue. Je pense un des issues que nous affrontons aujourd'hui, que les pays doivent être optimistes, qu'ils ont des mécanismes pour atteindre leur plan. Comme il a élevé ma collègue, c'est un élément essentiel concernant le changement climatique. Maintenant, dans tous les pays, ont ces contributions
to really achieve their
Comment
ambitions.
peut-on donner le pouvoir aux
From our
pays
perspective,
pour
in the kingdom,
atteindre leur
we
ambition
are
de
the way that we
notre
see
point de
finance
vue
is
ici d'Arabie
basically
Saoudite,
all the actions under the circular carbon
nous
economy.
voyons
So
comment
the
ces
food reduce,
financements
whether we're talking
les
renewable,
mesures,
etc.,
procédures
or if we're
de
talking
ces
about
financements
carbon
concernant
capture,
l'émission de
or if we're talking
gaz,
about
si
removal.
l'énergie est
But,
renouvelable. Nous avons déjà
and
parlé de
as Zoe mentioned, every country
l'élimination
has
de
different
ces
circumstances,
émissions,
different
comme il
approaches in
avait
how they do
dit
and how they
qu'il
approach their
a
climate.
sa
When we go to the
propre
financial sector, and
méthodologie,
I had several conversations,
mais quand elle
it
parle
seems that
du
some of the
secteur de
framework
finance,
is,
j'ai des
have some
discussions
predetermined criteria on what
concernant
they
le
finance.
cadre,
And although the
d'identifier
science have been
les
extremely clear on what we
classifications,
need, and especially if we go to the
la
IPCC, that
science
there will be no
est
back to 1 point, keeping the
évidence
temperature by 1.5 without abatement
qui
or
nous
removal.
guide
But
qu'il y a
when we discuss this, when this
un
is discussed within the
chemin
financial
que
sector,
pour
it
éliminer
seems that there's still
ces émissions
reform that maybe is
dans,
in progress
dans
to
le
really catch
secteur
up
de
to
financement.
where the science is
Il y a
telling us
des
to go. So we have a challenge, and I think
résolutions.
it's a global challenge.
Nous
And the
avons
challenge
un
is how
défi
the financial regulatory system would really finance the future of climate
comment
action
les
rather than the
législations
current status quo. Because if the current status quo stays,
forment
I
ces
think all these
défis
ambitions
s'ils
may
dépendent
have
sur
a
les circonstances
significant
actuelles
challenge for them to be achieved by many
qui
countries. In
va
addition to some of the great points that
causer des défis
Cornelia
et des
have already
problèmes.
mentioned also regarding the
Aussi les
support
points
that is
que
intended
mon
within the
collègue
global climate change
avait
regime and many other
évoqué
elements.
sur
But
le
just to go
support
on with I think we have a challenge, and I think governments can work together maybe with the financial sector
alors
to
que
really,
les gouvernements
on one of the
peuvent
important things that have been
s'entretenir
maybe
et
central to the discussion for this year and the next year, which is really reforming the financial sector and the MTBs to
l'année
really have
prochaine,
an
nous allons
inclusive
former
push for climate action.
dans le secteur de
Thank you.
finance qui
That's
doit
a
être
very
global.
important challenge you noted, but
Merci.
also opportunity, as you highlighted as
Oui,
well.
ça, c'est
That
un
we have
défi,
an opportunity to work
très
together,
important
willing
et c'est
governments,
une
as you
opportunité
both
de
pointed out,
travailler,
that are trying to create
nous travailler
the
ensemble
framework
et
for,
le
for
gouvernement
allowing more, enabling the
s'entretienne
private sector and
et
the financial
s'échange
institutions
pour
to come on
donner
board.
le pouvoir au
Maybe with
secteur
that,
privé.
I'll hand it over to Rehan. You highlighted for us that you wanted to discuss water and
On va
desal, and that's
passer,
one of those
nous allons
areas
passer
that
à
I think many
Rehan.
see as needed, but also as a challenge with the
parlé
energy
de l'eau
needed
et
to produce and its
distillation
environmental impact.
de l'eau,
So why
alors
don't
que
you take us down that
l'énergie
perspective?
Sure. I mean, first of all, I'd like to
l'énergie
echo what
vient
Riyadh said,
de
because
l'eau.
a big part of it is getting the
Premièrement,
ecosystem
j'aimerais
right.
bien
So
que
it's certainly
une grande
finance, but
partie
it's also it's a mixed bag.
dépend
When
sur
you
le
look at the countries,
financement.
right? So in some places, you've really got an
Si
absence
vous
of a clear policy
voyez dans
framework.
des pays, dans certaines régions,
In
ils
other
ont leur
areas, it's about how it
politique
really comes together. And I think
et ces
getting that right,
régions,
getting the discussions at the MDB
le-
level is something that's there.
les
And certainly
défis
the
ici
future
dans
is a
ces
big
régions, c'est de
topic
travailler
at
ensemble et
COP28
de
for sure.
s'entretenir.
Desalination, okay, and let me
Ce
reflect a little
serait
bit on
un
Aquapower's
sujet
journey,
important.
because our roots are in
J'aimerais bien de
desalination,
parler
actually. And
de le voyage
the
de
focus has been
Aquapower
historically is
pour
to get
la
energy
distillation
efficiency.
de l'eau.
50% of the cost of desalination is energy, and has been
Il y a une
technological
capacité
advances as well. So historically, thermal
de
desalination,
l'énergie,
multi-flash
mais
distillation,
historiquement,
is very expensive and highly energy
concernant le dessalement de
focused,
l'eau,
right? So big cost of it
et
was energy. If you've picked up the news recently,
il peut coûter
we've got the world's
une
largest
somme,
desalination
une
plant
grande
in
somme
Riyadh,
d'argent.
in the UAE, but we've
Nous
just
avons
beaten
aussi
our own last
les grandes
record, in Hasyan,
stations
which
de
is
dessalement
at
d'eau
0.37
on a
cents.
aux
The
Émirats
lowest we've
arabes
ever hit.
unis.
And a large part of that is being able to do that because you're working on the energy side of it.
60%,
Plus, obviously, a lot of
et nous avons le pouvoir.
technology, which the great part
Et
is
c'est une partie
being
de
part of the
financement
Saudi
et de
ecosystem, we
technologie.
can bring that to bear. So we can
Et
take
comme nous
that
sommes
as
une
part of
partie,
what we're doing
de
here,
ce
we can
système
take it across
que nous faisons ici,
across the region,
nous
for
pourrons
example.
le
And the world,
transformer
indeed. I mean,
dans la région.
in Asia for this sort of thing. But it does require the right ecosystem. So even if we can move with pace, it requires that we have the right ecosystem and framework in place. But the good news is the technology is not something that is going to be a blocker right now. From a cost point of view, we brought it down significantly. So we're able to achieve it. We're able to do it. 80-90% of the cost of what it used to be 10 years ago has come down. So it certainly makes it easier to deploy. And again, from a technology point of view. But I think, like I said, it's about the ecosystem and the financing. If we can get this working together. And the reality is, when we say the region, it is quite disparate and quite varied. So to do something like we are doing and to deliver it in the UAE is very different to trying to achieve that in different parts of the world. And again, at the risk of going on at the multilateral development banks, it's a big part of the puzzle. So we keep coming back to similar sort of theme, if you like. But thank you for bringing up water, because I think it's critical. I think we don't talk about water scarcity enough. It's a huge area.
Discuter ce point,
je pense que c'est un point très sérieux, crucial pour l'Arabie Saoudite.
Great, thank you. Zoe, since everyone seems to be referring to what you've been sharing with us, would you like to come in on this question as well?
Yeah, sure. So, wholeheartedly echo the ecosystem point, right? If there's transparency around what a sensible climate-aligned transition plan looks like for economy that fits the individual circumstances of each region and the competitive advantages of each region, that sort of signal helps to unlock capital, but equally, capital needs to provide the signals around what it's prepared to support and prepared to walk away from in an environment whereby the challenge of climate and getting emissions down is the most important one. So, of course, every region has its own particular circumstances, as I mentioned earlier. But, if you look at Asia, the big topic that finance is focused on in Asia is how to move away from coal-fired power stations fast. Whereas in the US and Europe, it's about scaling up more renewables and decarbonising industry. And here in the Middle East, it's about focusing on oil and gas and growth in the competitive advantage that this region has in terms of resources, but how to do that in a zero carbon way, which is what we're talking about here on circular economy, and raising knowledge and capacity about how the circular economy fits in this region so that potentially can be translated into other places. So I think, having worked on this space for a long time now, I see that the seeds of best practice in terms of signalling to the market the direction of travel, talking to different stakeholders around why they have different viewpoints, and on the speed of emissions reduction in particular, which is mostly the climate discussion, and why that is or isn't feasible and what needs to happen to unlock an accelerated action. Those dialogues are happening, which gives me hope for a successful outcome on faster emissions reductions in COP28. What's tricky is inevitably every viewpoint, every centre of gravity has its own decision trade-offs in moving away from fossil fuels. If it's power, for instance, and you're solely talking about power, there can be substitutes into renewables, but in some places there might not be. The substitute may be gas instead of renewables. And in other places where industrials are a heavy contributor to the economy, then decarbonising the industry sector is more costly right now, right, than scaling up renewables. So clearly we're doing a lot of talking, which is fantastic, but we need to accelerate that knowledge sharing of
cher
what
et nous
works
devons
so that we can
accélérer de
replicate commercial
transmettre
viability, policy
ces
enablement,
connaissances
financial flows
qu'il y a
faster
pour
across the
avoir
economy
la
as a whole.
capacité
And
de
again, I'll
donner le
come back to the point
pouvoir
that long-term
dans
vision
d'autres pays,
of
d'autres
signaling
régions.
where the economy wants to go is incredibly helpful.
Donc c'est une
And if
vision
we
à
had
long
long-term signaling in
terme
other places, that would really mobilize capital
pourrait
faster.
être utile et le
Yeah,
transmettre dans
I
d'autres
wholeheartedly agree with you. I think there's one thing
je
which, when
suis
I look
d'accord
at
complètement.
when I look at sort of the
Lorsque je
68
vois
banks who are in sort of the carbon alliance,
les
it's a very Western
banques.
mindset, and
Oui, c'est un
forgive me for
point
saying
de
that,
vue
and
de
it's quite rigid,
l'Occident,
and I think
excusez-moi
there
de le
needs to
dire.
probably be, and who am I
Mais-
to say that, but there needs to probably be a little bit more wider thinking, because it's not, the
Nous
circumstances
devons
are not the same. You know, it's not the
comprendre
same in the
cela
semi-detached
de façon
home in
claire,
the UK or Switzerland
comme ma
from
collègue l'avait
somewhere in a
évoqué,
rural
que
village in the middle of
cette approche
Africa.
n'est pas
It's
similaire
a
en
very
Suisse,
different
même à la
reality. So I would
Grande-Bretagne.
encourage the
Aussi,
financial community
en
to sort of
Afrique,
have that
et nous
openness,
devons
and
motiver
also have that
le-
openness, as you
motiver le
mentioned.
secteur de-
You know, you talk
de la
about carbon
finance.
removal
Et
technologies.
nous, en
The
tant qu'êtres
financeability is one
humains,
thing.
quand on parle
You
de
mentioned
l'élimination
carbon
du
removal
carbone,
technologies in Europe in a TV talk show, which I
nous
recently
avons
did,
parlé
and
de
I was
ces
basically
techniques
laughed
en
out of the
Europe,
room,
de
being
rendre
told,
des
oh, this
sessions
stuff doesn't
interactives.
work. So we need to really encourage
j'ai parlé de ça,
at those technologies, and also financing and
toujours,
finding ways, maybe with
devons
multilaterals,
motiver
maybe with venture
ces
capital,
techniques
to
et
look at the
trouver des solutions
scalability of
et
these new technologies,
renforcer
as Joe
les
has pointed
relations
out many
bilatérales
times.
pour
The Secretary General of the
savoir
IF,
comment
we have about 50% of the technologies needed to really reach
secrétaire général
net
de-
zero by 2050 are either not there yet or not at the right scalability. So I think what it really takes is an open frame of
Nous
mind,
n'avons pas
and also
arrivé
for
encore,
for
mais
some of the
dirais,
rigid criteria to maybe readdress them and say, okay, how can we make it work for other
porte
regions?
verte. Comment pouvons faire ce
This is a very
sujet
interesting
est très
topic.
réussi
Before we switch to
dans
another question, I
d'autres
see everyone would like to come in. So how about we
régions. Ça,
continue
c'est un
along?
sujet très intéressant, mais avant de passer à notre
From a
sujet,
personal
je vois des
perspective,
collègues qui
because we are a
souhaitent
company that is at the receiving side of
commenter.
most of the dialogue
Oui,
that
nous
has
sommes
just
une
happened.
entreprise.
But I'd like to just add a quick anecdote
Nous
to
avons
the
toujours des
conversation here.
discussions, mais je
5 years
souhaite
ago,
commenter
a leading financial
pour la
institution
discussion.
had our first conversation
Avant,
about
il y a 5
putting
ans,
together a
nous
plantation
avons
with engineered
la
species.
première discussion
They shunned
avec
it down by
l'entreprise
saying you're an
de
environmentalist.
finance.
5 years later, His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin
Après
Rashid Al
5
Maktoum,
ans,
the ruler of Dubai, was
le
given
Cheikh
an award
Mohammed
for being an
bin Rashid Al
environmentalist.
Maktoum, émir de
So this is
Dubaï,
where we have come. This is where we have to understand that talking about the environment, talking about intelligent nature-based solutions does not necessarily mean that we don't qualify for the private or for that matter the multinationals to consider investments. But it's not particularly an individual problem because remember they have to document debits and credits. What value do you put to a tree that's only giving? Massively. I can't possibly put a value to a tree. My question is, why are institutions constantly looking to glorify themselves with solutions which are very complex, trendy, sometimes at the verge of being called as greenwashing, or for that matter, trying to put together an environment report that makes them look better. But at the same time, when they're giving innovative and efficient solutions, they say, perhaps next time, because now we're going ahead with the technology that does generate methane, or for that matter, capturing carbon from air, but are not open to solutions that might be far simpler, because it does not make them look good or great on paper and in front of the world. So I think that is a problem that most institutions need to address, more than the fact that what is in debit and what is in credit. We have to be really open to innovation, and we have to be okay to be uncomfortable with change.
Can I just keep the mic with you for 1 minute and and ask, since we've already kind of addressed it and through our discussion, what enabling policies or financial architecture did you find? You clearly didn't find an enabling financial architecture, but you may have found an enabling, regulatory framework or policies at the national level that enabled your firm your company to take off, if you will.
100% the leadership of the UAE government. And that requires a huge applause from this government, this audience. It is 100% the leadership of the UAE government. I'd urge the audience to give an applause the hosts of COP28, 100% the UAE government. They have created a framework which is progressive, which is appreciative of startups, which is appreciative of innovation, and IRENA, the International Renewable Energy Organization, which is equally far-sighted, is promoting innovation, private and public sector, which is opening up slowly. But then, yes, we have that enabler as the fact that the government is very promotive. Individually, or for that matter, specifically talking about the financial sector, perhaps not really, because like I mentioned, a couple of challenges that they face and not us entirely. But of course, slowly and steadily, with continued dialogue and with continued understanding, because the objective is to first understand. If you understand, you can create a framework, you can fully put the value behind a certain innovation. If you don't understand, there is no methodology to possibly give you a documentation of the financials. So understanding financial inclusion, and more importantly, the fact that we have to be really open to change. We have to be open to innovation, and the UAE government, more specifically in the region, has been a change maker, championing the agenda for climate change.
I didn't forget about you, Cosmos. I just want to keep it with Riyadh on the government. You had wanted to come in?
Yeah, I just wanted to come back, and I find this is a great conversation. I think what we hear, and from what I heard, there are different. Everyone is advancing, understand the magnitude of the challenge that we have, right? And at the same time, are advancing what they believe is the solution. And at this table, we see so many different solutions coming together. And the challenge for us, how can we make all these solutions?
Des solutions
and to go from there is just to go. I'll just go back to what Zoe mentioned, is sending a signal.
J'aimerais bien en revenir à ce que Zoé a évoqué, que l'Arabie Saoudite, il a des contributions, les initiatives de l'Arabie Saoudite verte, ces projets ce sont des signes
Joe had mentioned earlier, is sending a signal. The UAE actually investing also in CCUS and renewable is sending a signal. And I also have read reports of also several countries in Europe that are also sending a signal. The question is the financial system listening to these signals? Or where would be the source of the signal? Because here we have this regime where we have to really be ambitious under the Paris Agreement, under the Convention. And the countries are advancing their approaches under their national constitution. They're trying to be as ambitious as possible and sending the signals. So hopefully these signals will be received in this journey that we are going on together as we advance the work that we have to really tackle the challenges we have.
Cosmin, you want to come in and maybe give us your perspective from Armenia?
Yeah, well, one of the things that I want to talk is about, different technologies. Because right now, we're all championing solar and wind, and everyone in the private sector is chasing that. And I'm sorry, solar and wind are great, but you'll need much more. We're only 50% right of the technologies that we need. But why is all of the private sector chasing solar and wind? It's because there's been 12 years or more of subsidies only in these technology classes that have been invested time and time again, and supply chains developed so that the technology is mature enough to be deployable in economic scale. And there's been government, I know, at least in the European case, I don't want to talk for other regions, there's been que de l'expérience européenne, il y avait un financement, un grand financement qui a été aussi développé durant des années. Il y a 12 ans, en 2012 et 2010, concernant l'énergie solaire, et 6 millions de mégawatts. Maintenant, c'est moins d'1 million. Ils ont pris beaucoup plus d'investissements.
The one question that I'm having for the private sector,
la question que j'ai pour le poser au secteur privé aussi pour les gouvernements,
number one obstacle that needs to be removed so that
quel est le premier obstacle que nous devons l'éliminer parce que l'impact du changement est énorme. Nous avons parlé de 2 technologies de différents niveaux. Nous aurons aussi des technologies différentes. Et selon ce que nous avons discuté, 50% de ces technologies, nous n'avons pas besoin de les utiliser. Du point de vue législatif, si les chaînes d'approvisionnement, le secteur de financement, même augmenter le taux de risque. Est-ce que les gouvernements envoient leurs signes? Mais je ne pense pas. Il n'y aura pas un nombre suffisant pour le secteur public, mais il est évident nous devons que le secteur public doive collaborer aussi avec le secteur privé. La diversification entre les gouvernements aussi entre les circonstances de chaque pays, par exemple l'Afrique et l'Asie, le sujet ici n'est pas le même. Nous devons être unis et nous devons commencer à résoudre ce problème et nous devons commencer tous parce que c'est une responsabilité mutuelle. L'affaire ici que je vois, ça commence de chaque personne, de chaque individu. Parce que le rôle facilite ce sujet et met
to finance those developing countries or to finance
les plans
and
aussi
invest also
et financer ces plans et ces
fruitful or let's say the profitable not only with financial revenue, profitable even for ecosystems in some of the countries. And the same,
un plan de profit, c'est le même approche quand on parle du financement privé et les problèmes de cela.
Working and profitable projects. So the matter is that we are not winning.
Les projets,
I'm not saying net zero, if
ne
zero
pouvons
emission,
pas
but among countries
dans les projets rentables aussi, si nous pouvons arriver, nous n'allons pas regarder trouver des émissions et nous devons les résoudre avec nos efforts mutuels et des collaborations, établir des collaborations et mettre en place des conférences comme celle-ci.
Creating the ecosystem, but tailoring it to the region, to what suits and what works in each area. I don't think we can kind of have this discussion without getting in a little bit, and I'm mindful of time, but I think we can fit this in on what role do you think carbon markets play in facilitating investment in clean technology? And I know there was a separate session on that, but it would be good to have discussion a bit on it here.
Yeah, I think carbon markets are incredibly important if you look at sort of decarbonizing in encouraging. But again, it's a matter of frameworks. And I think the voluntary carbon market we see in the kingdom is a very, the initiative between the Daboul and the Public Investment Fund is a very good thing. We'll talk about that in another session tomorrow. The one thing that I'm struggling with, and I keep on getting laughed out of the room with my ideas. I'm always get laughed out of the room and say, you know, if we have these carbon markets so diverse, and we have the price of carbon so diverse, I mean, your traders, they love arbitrage. So we'll do arbitrage. So we should work towards, getting a price for carbon that is universal. And I know that's a very tall fate, but I don't see how it can really work if we have very diverse prices for carbon, because then there's arbitrage and we might not get there. So I know it's a tall fate, and I'm probably getting laughed out of this room again, but I have strong shoulders.
Il y a des personnes dans
Zoe, I saw you shake your head.
Salle, peut-être qui...
I don't want to come in on it.
Okay.
Zoé, je vois que vous...
Before, I think, we have a bit of time for one more question, I think, before we head towards a wrap-up. You've already highlighted that there are things that have been working and that there are areas where, what the challenges are and what needs to be done. But I was wondering if anyone can share with us examples that they've seen that have worked very well. This is, let's try to facilitate that knowledge exchange. And from either across MENA, but also across other regions, and many of you work with different regions.
Non seulement dans
le
Moyen-Orient, mais aussi en Afrique du Nord. Est-ce que vous pouvez échanger avec nous des exemples qui a connu des réussites, du succès?
Let me go ahead, sorry.
Donc,
let me just talk about a little bit about finance.
Commencer à répondre à cette question. J'aimerais bien parler du côté de financement.
Right? And we, so from a collaborative point of view,
concernant l'hydrogène vert, du point de vue nous travaillons avec les autres systèmes environnementaux. Nous avons aussi des partenariats avec l'Arabie Saoudite aussi, Qatar, et Sabre, et
innovation and R&D team in China. But I want to come back to talk a little bit about climate finance and innovation and bringing together the finance community innovatively to deliver the world's first largest green hydrogen project. So the thinking around that and the collaboration around that, bring 26 financial institutions together to close an $8.5 billion project and financially close it is quite an achievement in collaboration in and of itself. The reason I bring it up is because it's the first major scale one. And to imagine the level of scale and determination that it took to get us to it. Now, we're only at the start of that journey.
Et la volonté, nous sommes au début de ce voyage.
I say 10 million tons of hydrogen. That's about 50 of our projects, essentially, if you look at it.
Des millions de tonnes
the innovation and collaboration that it took at a finance level to bring these two shows you that it's possible. And it's what I started with, right? In terms of, if you just look at where we were and where we are today, if you had raised this as something a few years ago, I would have been laughed out of the room.
Si je dis
cela,
peut-être les gens rient. Donc ça, c'est un exemple qui a connu un succès.
Dovetail off experiences where there's a need for tying in more supply chains. And this is, for example, Europe-Canada collaboration that I've seen on nuclear sector, and I'm talking to things that I'm closer to. On one end, having the same set of regulations that are admitted from a technology, boiler pressure reactor, safety standpoint, or an understanding of that, allows for you to get better partners. So as we are assessing technology readiness levelness, as we're assessing nuclear safety, and there are collaborations between regulators worldwide, and they collaborate very well in this field between themselves in understanding and equivalating standards. Or EPRI, for example, that's a standard-setting mechanism worldwide. That allows you to draw in all the resources and manage to have a unitary framework for assessing technical risk. I'm not going to talk about the others because that's probably for another type of discussion. But if the financial community can, figure out or indicate types of standardizations in terms of technology deployment or supply chain involvement or QA, ISOs, I mean, I don't know. I think we'd all be a little bit better off because everybody will have the same understanding, and a lot of the red tape that we try to explain with consultants and so on, which can get quite expensive in time and budget, can be better invested otherwise in that talent put to work in other types of fields.
Great, thank you. We have very little time left, but I would like if you'd like to come in, or
if you'd like me to reflect on
sure, please. I'd love to hear if you have something you would like to share.
No, I just wanted to just maybe just bring up one example that we have for collaboration that maybe next door, where we have Mission Innovation Summit for Cities that's happening right now as we speak. This is just a great example of, the different global initiatives that are really needed. The challenge we have before us is need extensive collaboration. And there are many platforms that have been very successful and really advancing the work. We have something going on next room, but also since we are at MENA, I would like to also mention the Middle East Green Initiative. And already under it, there is a platform for exchange for the circular carbon economy and a few other initiatives that I'm sure have been highlighted by our colleagues earlier. But really coming together is going to be the one thing that will make the difference. We come at a point, especially this year, we have the global stocktake, the Paris Agreement that will be at the COP28. It will be very important point. And I think one of the enablers for us, and something that might come up from the GST, would be really international collaboration. And really putting ourselves and our heads together and really advancing all these solutions in all the different platforms we have, like Mission Innovation, Clean Energy Ministerial, the Methane Pledge, and so many other ones that we have out there.
Great. Thank you so much for highlighting MGI and the Middle East Green Initiative. We're all looking forward to see how that works out for not just MENA, it overlaps with many of our countries in Africa and other areas as well. And you already anticipated my next question was, which maybe in under 30 seconds if we can do it for each one, what priorities or would you like to see discussed and addressed at COP28 this year? I can start with you,
Well,
quel est le sujet que nous devons discuter à la COP28? Pour moi, les pays en développement, le financement, la collaboration, l'obligation et le développement dans ces pays.
In a way or another,
Il y a beaucoup de pays en développement qui ont perdu la confiance, mais la responsabilité unie, ce sont les sujets que j'aimerais en discuter à la COP 28.
Sorry.
Time to go.
I think we can take a few more minutes. What do you? I'm not getting it. Okay, great. Thank you. I saw you nodding. Do you agree? And
yeah, I totally agree, and I would wholeheartedly echo that. And what I would like to see is a real commitment from the developed world on how to finance the developing countries,
financer ces pays, l'utilisation de ces technologies. Nous ne pouvons pas y travailler. Il y a
And that is truly shameful.
So
I would like to appeal to the developed countries to actually, if they make a commitment, to stick to it and bring it out. And
il y a des obligations envers ces pays.
It's worse than Paris. Budgets are constrained, and interest rates are very high. So this is hard on developing countries.
Que le taux de profit est augmenté et
to focus on one part, I would say maybe it's the fourth element of the goals of the COP28 from the UAE, to have one of the most inclusive COPs. And inclusivity also would be really inclusivity of the solutions and a positive focus on how can we really enable all the different pathways that the countries have determined in their national determined contribution, and how can we get there. So it will be a great moment where we come together and really focus on the solutions and focus on collaborations to really implement these solutions.
En mettant l'accent sur ces problèmes et y trouver des solutions.
Definitely, I think most of the points that were covered by the fellow panelists, but my personal interaction would be more specific to highlighting the importance of bamboo as the next disruptive technology for global warming. Not only does it cover climate change, industry, for that matter, energy, and also 100% biodegradable utilities. From a holistic standpoint, I'd like to see governments also open to having more conversation about simple yet effective solutions. Because unless we have a mindset that is open to change, it's not really going to happen. One country doing, or rather achieving the net zero target is not really going to help the entire world. So it has to be everybody, it has to be a collective responsibility, not just the responsibility of the financial world, but everybody's responsibility. So it has to be a collective approach, and I'm hopeful that most governments, policymakers, people of influence can highlight that and be open to understanding innovative solutions. Thank you.
Thank you. So, a couple of things.
Nous devons être ouverts pour vers ce changement.
Both on the finance side and also on the government side and industry in terms of raising ambition on NDCs, but able to actually deliver on that ambition. But most importantly, it is that fourth point of inclusivity, right? Because every starting point has a role to play in the shift. And the priority is to get emissions down fast. And we can only do that if we have every sector of the economy in the room talking about the solutions and the pathway to get there.
Yeah, I think, I think this is not about priority. It's about doing everything, really. It's really about making sure we cover all of it. I think the point around the global south and what the developed world has to do to step up. I mean, there's no question about it. About time now.
Développer aussi ces solutions.
But really, yeah. I know you're short on time. Before your next alarm goes off, I concur with the rest of my panel.
I'll be very short. We're looking forward to the upcoming COP and discussions this week. It's all about inclusivity, yes, from regional, people perspective, but also technology. We need everyone, all hands on deck to make this happen.
Great. Thank you so much to everyone here. I don't think I could possibly encapsulate everything that has been shared. Very excellent points, and for us to take forward on whether it's knowledge sharing, even South-South exchanges, but also from the developed world and back and forth from the developing world to the developed world, and how important it is to have an ecosystem tailored to each region with regulatory frameworks that enable the private sector, enable financing solutions. And very important on innovation scalability. It's important that we take that forward and look for ways to ensure that solutions, potentially simple solutions that don't need a lot of hoopla, as you were saying, for scalability, and very important to send the right signals, which are already there, but now how do we act on those signals? So looking forward to seeing you all at COP, where we can continue the discussion, and thank you so much for the rich discussion today. A round of applause for our panelists.
Merci pour vos discussions et vous applaudir à mes collègues.